Welcome to the Putnam County Museum. I'm Chris Worcester, and I'm president of the board of the museum, and it's great to see such a wonderful crowd here for the opening of the Irwin Family Founding Families exhibit. Thank you all for coming. I'm just curious, how many of you are here for the first time? Well, welcome again. And this is, the Putnam County Museum is a county-wide museum. And we are so pleased to see people from all over the county, from places other than just Greencastle, here for this exhibit and for the other things that are here to be seen here at the museum. This is because of the success of exhibits like this one and others that we have had here recently. The museum is growing and changing, and we are looking for a new home. Some of you may have heard about this. You'll be hearing a lot more in the months to come. We need more space for these kinds of exhibits, for our collections, for events, and we also have a bit of urgency because our lease in this space expires at the end of 2016. So we're working very hard to locate that new home for the museum, and please stay tuned for some exciting news to be coming up very soon. So now I would like to introduce our Executive Director, Kit Newkirk.
Thank you, Chris. I share Chris's pleasure that you have all come out this morning. This is the opening of the Irwin Founding Family exhibit, which is a part of a series that we have been doing at the museum, and it's all been spearheaded by Malcolm Romine, one of our volunteers. And I will tell you that Malcolm told me that he was a little skeptical when Ron Price brought up the idea of doing an Irwin family exhibit in coordination with a guy who lives in Montana. And a week ago, on Friday, we got several boxes from Montana, beautifully organized, listed. On Monday, we started to open them up, and so this all got put together in just 3 days. Thanks again to volunteers, not only Malcolm, but Vicky Kreider, Rita Schendel's not here today, Sarah Ellen Peters is not here today, but it was all put together by volunteers, and we think it's one of the best founding and family exhibits that we have had the pleasure of putting on. So I'm going to turn over the mic to Dr. Steve Irwin, who spearheaded this, gathered up the artifacts, drove to Indianapolis and Roachdale, that's right. Coming in with signs and all the things. And he knows lots about this story, and I'm going to let him tell it.
Thank you. I'm overwhelmed. It's so good to see all you folks who've been our lifelong dear friends. And 1,800 miles to Montana is really not that far, but it's sure not very often that we get to see you, and it's so great to be able to see friends from Putnam County and Roachdale, and it's just really a treat for Jan and I both. On behalf of the Irwin family, I would really like to thank the Putnam County Museum for giving the opportunity for the Irwin family story to be told. And I can assure all of you that the Irwins, whether they still live in Indiana or whether they're from Montana's Big Sky Country, we're proud Hoosiers at heart. And specifically, we're very, very proud of our Roachdale and Putnam County roots. The staff of this museum is fantastic. They really are. Kit Newkirk is an extremely capable CEO. She is one of the best multitaskers I have ever seen in my life. She really gets the job done. So the museum is extremely lucky to have her. And no organization like this can ever thrive without a good volunteer corps. And the volunteers have been a treat to work with this last week. I know some of them are not here, but Rita Schendel, Vicky Kreider, Vicky, you're here, aren't you? Stand up, okay, you deserve it. Sarah Ellen Peters, Malcolm Romine, right here. These people are very artistic. They have a wonderful eye. They're great curators. They really know how to put an exhibit together, and it's been a lot of fun to work with them. It really has. Every exhibit, every exposition, anything always has to have an idea person, a spark, an originator. And the idea, the spark, the genesis of this exhibit really goes to our very, very close and good friend, Ron and Susan Price. They're still working over here, so Ron and Susan, they have put a lot into this. And believe me, we wouldn't be here today doing this, you wouldn't be here today to see this exhibit if it weren't for Ron and Susan. They really get all the credit in the world. They really do. So thank you, Ron and Susan. There are some members of the Irwin family here today that I would like to have stand up and introduce as well. Anne Irwin Warden and her husband, Dr. John Warden. Beth Irwin Shifley and her husband, Gary. And Bill Irwin, his wife Katrina is not here. And Bill, you have some...
Right. I have my daughter, Amanda Lucci, and my son, Alex Irwin.
And then the last person I'd like to introduce is the most special person in the world to me, and without whom nothing would happen and nothing would go forward, and has just been the wind beneath my wings for 35 years, and that's my lovely wife, Jan. The history of the Irwin family in Putnam County begins with Joseph Irwin, who moved from Perry County, Indiana, to what was called the Rogers Farm, south of Portland Mills, in 1828. And Ron Price and I hiked the Rogers Farm yesterday, and I can see why he was attracted to it. It's a beautiful, beautiful piece of land. His son, Benjamin Franklin Irwin, was born 1.5 miles southwest of Morton in 1831. He was a farmer and a Baptist. Benjamin Irwin married Elizabeth Hansel in 1853, and they had 10 children. A son, George W. Irwin, was born in 1856. George W. Irwin spent the first 18 years of his life on the farm and received his education at common schools. He entered the Bloomingdale Academy, but was unable to complete his education because of failing health. He returned home until his health partially improved, and then entered the drugstore of Dr. James Crooks at Bridgeton, Indiana, and studied medicine as an apprentice. Now, Dr. Crooks wrote an autobiography in 1892, and if any of you here in Putnam County can find a copy of this, I recommend that you buy it, because it's fascinating reading. And really, the chapter in here on poisoning fish with buckeye roots in Big Raccoon Creek is worth the read. Those guys really knew how to fill a wagon full of fish, I'll tell you. But in the book, he has this to say about George W. Irwin. I took George Irwin when he was a small boy, and he learned the drug business. He was with me for several years and was an honest and faithful young man, and made me some money. He was in my employ when the store burned, and for some time afterward. He learned drugs, made a success, and is now in business in Roachdale, Indiana. George W. Irwin married Martha Elizabeth Cossett in 1887 at Bridgeton. He moved to Rockville and managed a drugstore for 3 years for Frank Mahan before moving to Roachdale and establishing the Irwin Drug Store in 1891. About 1902, he bought a brick building on Meridian Street and remodeled it into the Irwin home, and that home, the last couple of years, has been restored by Joe Boozer. Joe, you're here somewhere, I know, right back there. He's done a beautiful job. And it's such a pleasure to see the old Irwin homestead on Meridian Street be remodeled into the glory that it really once had. And this fall is going to become a bed and breakfast. And so I would urge you, whether you live in Roachdale or whether you live out of town, this would be a great place to come and spend the weekend. And Joe is also on the board of directors of the museum here. George W. Irwin was a member and elder of the Roachdale Presbyterian Church. He was past master of Roachdale Lodge number 602 and a charter member of the Roachdale Knights of Pythias. George Irwin died in 1920. I quote from George Irwin's obituary. He was a man of strong personality and yet ever kind and considerate of others, standing firmly for the right as he saw the right, yet broad-minded and intolerant of those who might differ from him. His business life was safe but progressive. Socially, he had a smile for his friends and a cheerful word to everyone. He did as much for the upbuilding of the community as any man, and as a Christian, was loyal to his church and to all efforts to advance the causes of Christ. Martha Irwin lived for 47 years after her husband's death and attained an age of 101. George and Martha Irwin had 4 children, one an infant that died at birth. Florence Irwin was born in 1888, and she was George Irwin's eldest child. She married Stuart Hostetter, who preceded her in death. They lived their entire lives in Roachdale. They had one son, Irwin Hostetter, who was a prominent physician in Muncie, Indiana. Irwin Hostetter graduated from Roachdale High School, received his bachelor's degree from Wabash College in 1937, and his MD degree from Indiana University in 1941. He was a World War II veteran serving with the Air Force. He married Audrey Gibson of Muncie. Irwin Hostetter possessed qualities of mind and heart which endeared him to patients, and he had a personality that radiated deep understanding and compassion. His devotion to duty and his eagerness to be of service won him the admiration of his medical colleagues. He was a doctor of the people who loved and respected his fellow man regardless of their station in life. He was a throwback in many ways to the old family doctor. He was never disturbed about answering calls at any time of the night. And I remember speaking with Irwin Hostetter in the 1950s during the height of the baby boom, and he told me at that time, and for the 2 or 3 years preceding that, he was averaging delivering over 1 baby per day. Glenn Ward Irwin was George W. Irwin's second son, was born in 1891 in Roachdale. He was educated in the Roachdale schools and received a BS degree in pharmacy from Purdue University in 1911. He married Elsie Browning of Greencastle in 1919. Glenn had a position at an Indianapolis drugstore before joining his father in the Irwin drugstore in Roachdale, where he worked until the day before he died in 1982. Irwin drugstore was located mid-block on Washington Street in the business district of Roachdale. Its entrance was marked by a faded Coca-Cola sign over the door. It was a beacon of stability to the residents of that town. Until 1925, Glenn Irwin compounded his own drugs. He had the first radio in town, and people would gather there on Saturday afternoons to listen to the ball games. That drugstore was New Day Paint, it was Fletcher's Castoria, and Kodak Film. But it was much more. It was an institution in this small rural Indiana town and represented what was the good life all over rural America. Glenn was an expert ornithologist. He was really adept at identifying birds by their song, and he was also a philatelist. And still today, I'm a stamp collector, an avid stamp collector because of his influence. Galen Seton Irwin was born in 1902. He was the youngest child of George W. and Martha Irwin. He graduated from Roachdale High School, attended the University of Wisconsin, and studied art at the Academy of Fine Arts in Chicago. He married Mary Elizabeth Hill in 1928, and she preceded him in death. He then married Mabel Smythe Young in 1943. Finding it difficult to make a living as an artist in the 1920s, he joined the staff of Roachdale Bank and Trust Company as an assistant cashier in 1923. He became president of the bank in 1956 and retired in 1968. He remained chairman of the board until 1983 when he moved to Montana. He was president of Hendricks Telephone Company, later known as Communications Corporation of Indiana. Galen Irwin was a hunter, a fisherman, an outdoorsman, and an avid collector of prehistoric Indian artifacts, and over a course of many years assembled one of the country's very finest collections of prehistoric artifacts. It's difficult to talk about Galen without talking about Glenn, and vice versa. The two brothers were extremely close. They were very good friends. The bank was just about 3 doors from the drugstore, and every morning, mid-morning, my dad would go down and talk to Glenn, and they would plan their activities and discuss their lives. So I almost need to talk about them in concert. Both Galen and Glenn were charter members, past presidents, and 50-year members of the Roachdale Lions Club. They created the Roachdale 4th of July celebration in 1933. And They did it for the good business of Roachdale, but also did it so that their children would have something to do in the summertime. They were both members, past masters of the Roachdale Masonic Lodge. They were both members and elders of the Roachdale Presbyterian Church. And they formed Irwin Brothers Corporation, which did many projects to benefit the town of Roachdale. They owned the business block in the northwest corner of the business district of Roachdale. They bought the old schoolhouse, tore it down, and subdivided that into a new subdivision of Roachdale just at the time that the new school building was opened in 1952. They built the post office in 1957, which is still in use and is located right next to the Irwin House in Roachdale. The only child of Glenn and Elsie Irwin was Glenn W. Irwin Jr., who was born in 1920 and deceased in 2012. He attended Indiana University, where he received his BS degree in 1942 and an MD degree in 1944. He married Mariana Ashby of Ladoga, Indiana in 1943. He served in the U.S. Army Corps in Hawaii as Captain and Chief of Medicine. He joined the IU medical staff as an instructor in 1950 and was appointed Dean of the IU School of Medicine in 1965. His tenure marked a period of rapid growth and expansion at IU. University Hospital was built, and Riley Hospital for Children was greatly expanded. In 1973, he was appointed Chancellor of IUPUI and became Vice President of Indiana University. He retired in 1986, but continued to head numerous fundraising committees. Board memberships included the Idle George Museum, Greater Indianapolis Progress Committee, Riley Children Foundation, Walter Medical Research Institute, and the YMCA. He was a member and elder of the Second Presbyterian Church in Indianapolis. He was a Sagamore of the Wabash by 3 Indiana governors. He received the Distinguished Alumni Award from Indiana University and held honorary doctoral degrees from IU and Marian University. During his time as chancellor, he and Mariana resided at the Eli Lilly Estate, and a cabin on Lake Wawasee was their summer family getaway and escape. Now, I think we could really do a lecture series on the accomplishments of Glenn W. Irwin Jr. But I have picked out one, and I kind of confirmed this with his children. I think his greatest accomplishment of many was what's known today as the Indiana Plan. Glenn Irwin Jr. knew 4 facts about medicine in Indiana. Number 1, he knew there was a tremendous shortage of doctors. Number 2, he knew it cost a lot of money to train doctors, and the money really was not available through the legislature. Number 3, he knew that doctors that were trained in Indiana stayed in Indiana. And number 4, he recognized the fact that there was a tremendous pool of talent all over the state of Indiana. South Bend, Evansville, Fort Wayne, Lafayette, on and on and on. So what Glenn Irwin Jr. did is